was paid €500 million in allegedly fake jobs.
À travers Pénélope, on cherche à me casser.
Kids are involved as well.
Comment l'extrême droite française Marine Le Pen a dévoilé ce week-end à Lyon ses 144 engagements.
After the electoral processes, one a presidential election, the other a referendum that shook the U.S. and the U.K. in 2016. The role of the news media in this year's French presidential elections bears watching. Just last week, the leading candidate on the right, François Fillon, told reporters he was the victim of a media campaign of unheard-of violence. He was referring to a story broken in an often satirical magazine called Le Canard Enchaîné about his wife being paid taxpayers' money for what appears to be an imaginary job. Further to the right, Marine Le Pen of the Front National has been watching with interest. Her party's journey from the political fringes to the center of attention has been aided by a noisy far-right subculture on social media that has her back. This is all rather troubling for the French political establishment, having seen Donald Trump triumph, even as he was painted as a proxy for Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. The same narratives, fake news and the Russian menace, are now gaining traction on social media. It seems that all that's missing in the political story unfolding in France is the middle ground. Our starting point this week is Paris. It was one of those stories, one of those rare pieces of journalism that changed the dynamics of an election campaign. Simple and easy for audiences to grasp. A politician's wife on the government payroll for 13 years with no real job description. The François Fillon story has featured on all French news platforms, ricocheting across social media. But it got its start in a weekly newspaper, a French institution that's more than a century old and barely has a presence online.
Le Canard Enchaîné has a huge impact. It's the most profitable newspaper in France, even though it doesn't contain any advertising. Ministries employ people to read it every Wednesday morning, to check what it's saying.
Il est notoire qu'au Canard Enchaîné,
Everyone knows that Le Canard Enchaîné is often used by politicians to settle scores. It's actually the go-to media outlet for politicians. If you have evidence against a candidate you want to take down, you give it to Le Canard Enchaîné and you know it will be published.
et on sait qu'il arrivera à bon port.
Il y a eu d'abord Le Canard Enchaîné.
First was Le Canard Enchaîné. Then Mediapart, Le Monde and BuzzFeed all publish information about Fillon's parliamentary assistant. Because once the first revelations come out, other journalists will dig up further information on the story, which creates this impression of intense media attention on François Fillon. Then he defends himself, calling it a campaign against him.
Une campagne contre lui.
Mais lyncher, assassiner politiquement, comme finalement vous l'avez fait, pendant 10 jours, un candidat à l'élection présidentielle, je pense que ça pose un problème.
C'est comme tous les candidats à la présidentielle qui se disent anti-system.
It's like all presidential candidates who are presenting themselves as anti-system. It's a popular image for voters who have had enough of the elite, who have had enough of the dominant narrative, and who do not trust the dominant media. This is totally paradoxical because they transmit this message at a press conference, filmed by all the television networks and in front of 200 journalists.
If you set yourself up in opposition to the media, break with them, then you're no longer seen as being their ally. You become a rebel on your own path, something that Marine Le Pen has always understood well.
C'est ce qu'a toujours compris Marine Le Pen.
If any party stands to benefit from the troubles of a leading conservative candidate like François Fillon, it would be Marine Le Pen of the far-right anti-immigrant Front National, the FN. Unlike the populist parties that have recently sprung up in Germany and Italy, presenting fresh challenges for journalists there, the FN has been on the ballot in France for 45 years.
Bonsoir Marine Le Pen. Bonsoir.
Although the party still takes issue with what it calls hostile coverage from mainstream news outlets, its leader is proving far more skilled at the media game than her father ever was.
Her most extreme positions are covered quite badly by the traditional media, especially by broadcast media, who are concerned not to be too divisive, so they don't emphasize strongly her extremist views.
Est-ce que pour vous, le candidat Fillon doit renoncer à la campagne présidentielle.
There was a time when this was justified, as they only represented 10% of voters. This position is harder to maintain today, when polls are showing 20, 25%, even 30% or more in some areas.
Sur certains terrains locaux ou régionaux. La différence simplement c'est que le Front National.
The difference is that the Front National is much more presentable now. It's not about denouncing people from North Africa or black people anymore. The narrative is now more about sovereignty, which is much softer. The difference between Jean-Marie Le Pen and Marine Le Pen, the father and the daughter, is the directness. Jean-Marie was bold enough to express his opinions. Marine usually holds back.
Marine Le Pen elle a souvent tendance à faire marche arrière.
In a way, Marine Le Pen can afford to pull back, knowing that there are other elements online saying the kinds of things her father used to say. A host of far-right sites and voices offer incendiary opinions about immigrants and the politicians deemed sympathetic towards them. Some are clearly fascists who support the FN and who dwell in what has come to be known as the fascosphere.
The fascosphere launches attacks on all rival candidates by creating a fake account with a Muslim first name followed by the candidate's last name: Farid Fillon, Ali Juppé, Bilal Hamon, Mohamed Macron. The message is that all candidates except Marine Le Pen are pro-Muslim, too weak with Islam and Islamism, and this idea that every single Muslim is a potential terrorist.
So it's a parallel strategy. On one side there is the official campaign in which the Front National is very good, and then there are militants, not necessarily members of the party, who will conduct the kind of campaign the Front National will probably not carry out themselves because it's too xenophobic or Islamophobic.
Ou des choses comme ça.
France also has a fake news problem. Former Prime Minister Alain Juppé, who lost in the primaries to François Fillon, said he was disgusted by false stories circulated online linking him to the Muslim Brotherhood. Fictional articles relating to the 2015 terror attack in Paris have also made the rounds. The details were gory, offensive, and untrue. Facebook has approached traditional French news organizations like Le Monde in order to harness the paper's fact-checkers to flag the site when questionable stories appear. The idea is to get the fact-checkers up and running before the election rather than after, as has happened elsewhere.
Facebook a déjà lancé cette initiative aux États-Unis.
Facebook already launched this initiative in the US and wants to launch it in Germany. They launched in the US after the election of Donald Trump because the role of fake news was the subject of intense debate there. For us, with social media platforms like Google, Facebook and Twitter serving as vehicles for false information, passing itself off as journalism, we, with our expertise and journalistic experience, want to work directly with Facebook and bring our editorial experience to bear through this tool.
C'est quelque chose dont...
This was proposed by certain media outlets some time ago, but it is open to criticism. Of course, the media outlets involved in these initiatives themselves make mistakes sometimes, like all the media. So people who are opposed to this fact-checking system can use this as a line of attack, saying that this media or that media made a mistake.
Pourquoi on devrait leur faire confiance maintenant?
Why should we trust them now?